Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to keep on with our State of the Faction series. We started that with the Tomb Kings just 2 days ago and we're going to talk about Bretonnia, a faction which has always remained close to my heart, even more so now since the release of Warhammer the Old World, because Bretonnia can actually win games now. And I've been thinking about them in Total War because, well, they were the free race. I know, it's weird. We actually ended up getting a race completely for free, which I understand why they did it. A lot of the units actually use the same animation rig and so on. It would have been really hard to sell a faction just heavily focused on horsemen. And by that, I mean lancers, and yeah, you guessed it, more lancers. It's unfortunate because there was not too much unique stuff, and this is where a dilemma comes in for this video, which is its own section. Can these guys actually get a paid-for DLC? The reason why I'm saying paid-for DLC, they're obviously missing a bunch of characters, there's a bunch of stuff that could be done, and not only that, when it comes to a faction getting a FLC rework and so on, it's never that good. Look at the Dwarves, for example, who got 2 FLC reworks. Finally, the last one in Thrones of Decay has sorted out all its major issues, but the Bretonnians did get their own rework too, and yeah, I mean, it fixed a bunch of issues. They did get a little bit of an update, which caused more issues than fixed issues until that got fixed too. But the main thing that did was update the race as a whole and not the factions involved in game. So that leads into the question, could Creative Assembly justify a paid DLC for Bretonnia? And it's a tough one. I honestly think that it is entirely possible, but it very much depends on what type of content would be in this hypothetical DLC, and not only that, but is it going to be worth it to justify the purchase of something for an attachment to something else that was already free. So not only would this DLC have to be decent in terms of what could be added in, where I think we'd get more characters than we would units, keep in mind that this would still be attached in the current 1v1v1 format, but also there needs to be a heavy restructure for Bretonnia, so more mechanics, more changes to individual lords too, to make them quite unique from each other. It doesn't have to be very, very unique, it just has to be in the same vein as the Empire, essentially. A way to basically just say, yep, this race is done, and that's it. I could see them not doing a DLC though. I could see them just doing an FLC, because we do know that the Beastslayer has been found in the game files, well, just a start position apparently, and obviously we've seen some art with Creative Assembly also stating that they'd like to do the Beastslayer at some point. So yeah, this could work too, but there are some things that I believe I could justify for Bretonnia, and maybe Creative Assembly could see it the same way. The only problem is obviously convincing Games Workshop. Now, just in case that it's just going to be FLC reworks and so on, which we know are coming eventually during the dead period between DLCs, I'd like to talk about the characters first, because I feel like that's going to be quite important. There are 4 legendary lords for Bretonnia. It's actually quite nice to see so many characters available to them, and really only 3 of them need any fixes, because Rapunzel is technically fine. She needs just some overall changes to Bretonnia, but she's got her own unique mechanic. Hell, she even has her own pseudo-legendary hero. Henry Le Massif is actually quite strong and does really benefit her campaign. So let's talk about the other characters, and we'll start off with the Fey Enchantress. Really, and I've said this since the very beginning of Warhammer 3, what I'd love to see for her, to make her a little bit more unique, really a copy-paste of the Hogwarts mechanic. So Kislev has access to a mechanic which allows you to make your spellcaster, lords, and heroes a little bit better, because it takes time for them to actually recruit, and you can get them with some extra traits and so on. And I'd argue that it actually makes more sense with the Fey Enchantress than it does with Kislev, as yeah, it would make sense that she's going to have the better spellcasters for Bretonnia, and I like the mechanic. It's actually really stylized. You can make some really, really cool lords with that. It's an RNG system. I know some people don't like it because you won't always get the traits that you're looking for, but at the end of the day, you can get some reduction to some units, better spellcasting, some better infrastructure stuff. Overall, it's a really cool system that I think would be great with the Fey Enchantress. I know some people don't like the idea of copy-pasting mechanics from other factions, but in some cases it does work, and it makes a lot of sense for this specific character. I would rather see something being reskinned and used in another character where it makes a lot of sense. We've seen that happen recently with the Thrones of Decay. Elspeth does use essentially what is Ikit's laboratory mechanic, and it actually ends up being quite a fun campaign. So something like this I think would be very much justifiable to use for the Fey Enchantress. Now Alberic had a pretty interesting change for the Immortal Empires. He got sent away, essentially. That's all I could say. They put him in Lustria, I kind of understand why. He does struggle for it, though. Keep that in mind, mostly because it's an army of horsemen and you're dealing with heavy, dense jungles and so on. It's not great, but it's definitely not an impossible campaign. There's two things that I would see done for Alberic to make him a little bit more enjoyable. First up, he and he alone should have the pseudo-horde mechanic, so this allows him to build up forces, kind of like a moving camp. At the end of the day, it's going to be quite useful for him, especially as you're going to want to be recruiting on the fly and fighting all the lizard men around you. Add in one of the mechanics that we get from our friend Marcus Wolfhart, the Empire character, which is right next door, which is the whole thing about hostile actions will result in retaliation from local factions. So the idea is, if you're there and you're going to be doing damage, the lizard men are going to wake up and decide, well, we need to get rid of this problem, same thing as the other one. It gives you more incentivization to ally up with Marcus, which we're generally doing anyway, but this should give you the option of, hey, do I want to stay in Lustria and potentially fight a bunch of angry T-Rexes, or should I just go back to Bretonnia as I'm able to do that? Hell, you should be able to go anywhere, because you could easily just go into the ocean and start sailing away. Keep in mind that obviously those pirate factions are quite strong, but yeah, you can buy some time, build up your camp, and then go somewhere else. The element of choice is a good one here. And lastly, for the king himself. A administration mechanic would be kind of cool, similar but not identical to that of Karl Franz, because this is the problem when you have a empire next to a kingdom. The problem is that they're very similar in terms of how everything is ruled, where the dukedoms are very much their own independent things, but still serve the crown, the same way as the provinces still serve the emperor. A big problem is the size of the map. Seeing as Bretonnia is so small, you aren't incentivized to have the other dukedoms up and running. You're going to want to confederate them as fast as possible, especially with how the game works right now with, you know, the AI dogpiling on you. You're going to want to expand and get the other Bretonnian cities ASAP. So I'm going to be honest with you, I'm having a bit of trouble trying to think of what could be done to make him very different to Karl Franz, because having two characters right next to each other like that, where they're both leaders and they're both very much administrative, might become a bit of an issue. What could be done is doing a decree system where you'll pick and choose faction bonuses, have them together, kind of similar to, you know how plagues work? So you can mix and match different bonuses, but in this case, there would also be some negatives attached. So if you've got two specific things, one could turn into a negative, and you could get those faction-wide bonuses for a certain amount of time. Maybe you guys have a better idea, but yeah, the king does need his own unique mechanic, or else he's just going to kind of fall flat, isn't he? But we're not done yet. You see, we have to talk about Bretonnia generically too. And yeah, I mean, it's the thing that people have been asking for since they came out in Warhammer 1. A crusade mechanic. There needs to be an incentivization to go out on crusades and go and fight other factions. And the way I could see it is literally just the Orc War mechanic, but with some minor differences. So, you'd get a enemy faction, and you'd say, okay, these are greenskins, I'm going to go crusade against the greenskins now. Rather than going to a specific settlement to take over and hold for a while, what you would be given is a bar, and it would say, greenskins killed. And you'd have to just fill that bar by attacking not just that one specific faction, but the greenskins as a whole. The more greenskins that you kill, the more that the bar fills out, and the more bonuses that you will get. The enemy faction that you did pick will just provide more bonus points. But the idea here is to give incentivization to go, okay, I want to go down to Lustria and fight the lizard men. This will give you more points because they're quite far away, and better rewards. Maybe if you fill out the bar, you could get a random item which would be very powerful that you could then add into one of your lords and make them feel more like the Grail Knights that they're supposed to be. Add in some unique artwork, maybe some Deus Vault memes, and there you go. The idea is give you incentivization to go out for certain factions, better rewards for the ones that are more distant to you. Because in most cases with the Bretonnian factions, the ones that at least are in Bretonnia, you'll solidify in Bretonnia, you'll slowly move into the Empire as the Empire starts losing land, and there you go. But what if you had a reason to go and lead a charge into the Darklands, into the Southlands, into Lustria, into Norska, whatever, you know? It would be just kind of cool to see that happen. Powerful buffs and items do incentivize the player to start branching out more. And lastly, which I think is quite important, make the Green Knight a proper legendary hero. He's a very cool character, and a lot of people forget he's there. You've got some summons for him. It'd be great if you could just have him all the time, have him switching out in armies and so on. I know he appears as a oh shit moments in terms of lore, like if Bretonnians are struggling and so on, maybe have him being able to be summoned to other locations, because that works, appearing in random battles, a chance for him to appear in battles. But he should also be a proper legendary hero. Unbreakable as he is, doing a lot of damage, getting some skill points to boost up your knights a little bit further would be kind of cool. But Bretonnia definitely needs a legendary hero that they can use fairly often, rather than just summoning him for a while, then he disappears and so on. I get why they did it, I honestly do, but they really do need the help. I've recently been rediscovering the fact that they do need a little bit more help, because the dogpiling can be kind of brutal. Lastly, the tech tree for the Bretonnians could do with a bit of a facelift. You know, split it up into two, kind of like what we've had recently for the dwarves and what we've had since the introduction of the Chaos Dwarves, as that system really does help. Have one for peasantry and the land, and then the other one for knights and warfare. I think that that would be better, it would be a bit more structured, and you could change around some things. Let's be honest, there's certain techs that could do with a bit of buffing, a few more techs could be added in for the purpose of warfare, and in general, just a proper facelift here. I think it would be really, really good if this faction specifically had that change. Stuff like the Empire doesn't need it, that's why the Empire didn't get it, but the Bretonnian one, I don't know, just feels kind of bad. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I feel like a little bit of a touch-up would be great here. Okay, and now we're going to talk about anything that's missing in terms of units and so on. We're going to have a pretty lengthy discussion here, because as you can see, the roster for the Bretonnians is incredibly anemic. You might not know this, but a bunch of units were actually just kind of created, or they were mentioned in lore, but never actually a thing. Hippogriff Knights, Royal Pegasuses are now a thing in the tabletop, but they weren't really a thing that you could have as units. Same thing with the archers, right? You see that you've got 3 peasant bowmen. It's actually supposed to be 1, just with different upgrades. And even with the infantry, you had men-at-arms, yeah, and they had sword and shield, or halberd and shield, but you couldn't really get peasant mobs. There weren't like generic ones without weaponry. You could have them, but the tabletop kit was actually always built to have them with a shield weapon too, unless you wanted to clip off the shield, but why the hell would you do that? Now, the limitations here aren't the fault of Creative Assembly. In fact, they've done whatever they could to give this faction some life. It's because Bretonnia first up got heavily reworked with its implementation in 6th edition, then was functionally ignored pretty much for 7th, 8th, and even the end times. Thankfully, now they've come back in a pretty interesting way for the old world. Still not a lot of new units, but they're still better than they were. They can actually win games, I said this before, but they can actually win games, it's great, and it's important because they finally got the attention that they deserve. Thankfully, there's still some missing stuff left, so yeah, let's talk about it. There are 2 characters which I could see being introduced as legendary lords. I don't know if Creative Assembly will do both, but yeah, I mean, this is entirely possible. The first one being Theodoric of Brionne. This guy is a character that actually wasn't too ignored. You know, he was introduced in 6th edition, fell in the issues of Bretonnia being, you know, forgotten about, but was reintroduced once again during the end times. What he's known for is a big battle axe, and his units are generally like that. I recently picked up a reprint of this when they did the made-to-order for Warhammer the Old World, because, I mean, why not? He looks cool. This character is known for carrying the battle axe instead of a lance, and he's just a general badass. The little lore that we do have around him says that, yeah, he loves music and he likes to fuck around. I know it's not the most interesting thing, but the model in itself is quite unique. I could see this guy being introduced as an FLC, but I don't know, especially since Bohemond Beastslayer is likely to show up instead. In a perfect world, we'd get both, though, because that would give us the 2, like, well-known Bretonnian characters. The Beastslayer is a character that we kind of expect to come anyway, because Creative Assembly have outright said it. I think Rich Aldridge said that he'd love to do the Beastslayer. We've seen the Beastlayer's art in the Warhammer 3 artwork, and yeah, I think it's only a matter of time. He showed up in the Storm of Chaos too, which actually makes him a little bit more relevant in terms of everything. He's the leader of Baston. I don't know if they'd put him in Baston. There was some speculated data mining that he could be somewhere else, which could be quite interesting, because it would be nice to have a Bretonnian somewhere else. And this could allow for a little bit more variety in terms of start positions, whilst also, you know, Bretonnia being very, very small is its own issue. There's also a unit of foot squires known as the Beastslayers of Baston, which are directly linked to him. So, yeah, I mean, there's already kind of hints. Add in Bertrand the Brigand, which is essentially Warhammer Fantasy's version of Robin Hood, in as a legendary hero to buff up peasants, peasant archers, and just like men-at-arms and stuff like that. This means that you have the Bretonnian version of Gorda's Backstabber, but it would allow for you to have a peasant army, which is very, very strong. It'd give you an archer hero, which should be quite good at sniping out some characters too. It would be cool if he had the other two lads with him, but I just don't see that happening, mostly because that would require a lot of unique models and so on. And to be honest, you only just need the one lad. Give him a horse mount too. And you've got a support character which can buff up the peasant armies. Again, something that you could use to buff up a generic army to make them feel like, yes, it's being supported by a legendary character. There are no missing Lord and Hero options. Interestingly enough, we actually have them all for Bretonnia. So we're going to go into a unit, and I'm going to talk about Foot Knights. Now, you might be saying, well, this is a Warhammer the Old World thing, so it's not going to happen. First up, Foot Knights have existed in the lore prior. It's just they were never really a model, but they have existed in the lore. And this is the thing, especially now with the Ogres basically going, yeah, we're going to get this upgrade, which was the Blood Vultures, and turn them into an actual unit, then why can't this happen, right? We've had many circumstances with Bretonnia where we've been able to see stuff that never existed or was slightly mentioned in the lore become its own unit. Foot Knights are desperately needed because, goddammit, CA, if you're listening, I am tired of defending walls with fucking peasants. There are many circumstances where you might need Foot Knights too, so I'm begging Creative Assembly here, either give us Foot Knights as individual units, or give the Bretonnian Knights of the Realm, Grell Knights and all that the ability to dismount. It's been done before by mods and so on, and it would be very useful when it comes to sieges. Those maps that Bretonnia has are freaking abysmal. What I would say is just do the hand weapon and shield one, and maybe ask Games Workshop if they can use the ones with the great weapons. This is the one that was actually introduced for Warhammer the Old World. The great weapon ones. I don't remember any others in the lore being mentioned to have great weapons whilst on foot in Warhammer Fantasy lore. Introduced Truffle Hounds, which was something that we actually knew about in the lore from a long time ago, as a Warhound variant, you know, so super fast, being able to capture control points quickly, faster than horses, basically as fast as Pegasus, as I'd say, and yeah, you know, war machine killers, little doorstops here and there. They'd be basically used like Chaos Warhounds and so on, but the Truffle Hounds could be expected, as it would be a very fast skirmishy unit for the Bretonnians, and it's something that I could see them reusing again when they do a Cult of Ulrich DLC, or vice versa if they decide to do the Cult of Ulrich first. But yeah, the Bretonnians could do with some fast-moving dogs. They've got a lot of skirmishing stuff with obviously the Mounted Yeomen and so on, but it would be nice to have the dogs too. Options, you know, doggos. Who doesn't love doggos? Maybe go into the deeper lore and find out what the hell a questing beast is supposed to be. Because the general gist, as most people see them, is like the Bretonnian version of the Demigryph, and that would be kind of cool, right? I would actually like to see that. It'd give them some heavy, monstrous cavalry. We've already got some very basic artwork of them, but that's it. I'm actually fairly surprised that when Bretonnia got redone for Warhammer the Old World, that we didn't see the questing beasts come in. You know, something that would actually be very cool, and new units obviously sell better than older ones. There's not a lot that they can do for Bretonnia, let's be very, very honest here. The reason why I'm trying to justify this as a DLC will be found later on, but yeah, questing beasts would be amazing. I'm fairly sure there was like a rumor that there was like a tester model done for them, but then just nothing came about it, possibly because at that point they had decided the end times was going to happen, so there was no point actually fixing up the Bretonnians. I forgot these models existed, but it's thanks to Old World that they've come back. Squires. Now, yes, you might be saying that we already have squires, the foot squires, but these would be generic squires, and they could change the name of the foot squires to something else. It's been happened before, we've seen that with like the Frostworm and so on. But essentially, yeah, skirmishy bow units, kind of like this would be weaker, but in same styling as like the Waystalkers for the Wood Elves. Obviously not as good, but the idea is a skirmishing bow unit, so it's not just peasant bowmen with poison, and peasant bowmen with fire. A higher version of the bowman with better range and good for scouting around, getting to the enemy sides and shooting them from there. I think something like that would work out quite well here, as it would be very different, and again, variety is the spice of life. It's not the fault of CA, but it shows the limitations to Bretonnia as a faction. They were never really properly, fully fleshed out. It's kind of funny that they're right now considered like top 3 for the for the old world, considering they have very little options. And then the final justification. If this becomes a DLC, then they can use that for a major rework for the Red Duke and finally make him a playable character. So you might be thinking here, they could just rework him for free in the reworks that they said that they're going to do between DLCs. And yes, but also no. See, the character isn't properly fully voiced yet. Unique voice acting. There could be a ton of work onto reskinning a bunch of units, and this would be turning the Bretonnians into a half undead faction. So half vampire counts, half Bretonnian sub-faction like everyone wanted. And at that case also, you know, do some new voice lines for the Bretonnians just to kind of fit with that, with different voice actors to make them more ghoulish and stuff. The idea here is to have a proper representation of the Fallen Dukedom. It'd be better if we had Tancred, the Fallen Knight, and the Black Knight of Mousillon, but at this point, I'm just happy with the Red Duke, because make him a character, make him playable, have a vampire count faction there, which is very, very different from the other vampire count factions in the same development cycle, and they're basically just stating here, like, yes, a lot of the work went for this, and it fixed up the main Bretonnian things. It's very obvious that, yes, you know, the reworks and so on do cost money, and they're generally free, but it's on the same production time as a DLC. So Bretonnian DLC adding in the final stuff that Bretonnia needs, another character, a legendary hero, which would be great, and obviously some reworks, but also, boom, surprise! Rather than an FLC Bretonnian, rather than an FLC whatever 2 factions would show up here, you get Mousillon as a sub-faction. Again, I could be wrong here, but this is something that I feel could work very, very well. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm just spitballing an idea because a lot of people were asking about Bretonnia, and this is what I could come up with. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.